Welcome to the Money Huddle, a podcast that explores financial topics for families and small business owners. Hosted by Michael Baker and Ross Marinell. All opinions expressed by Michael and Ross or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and may not reflect the opinions of Planners Alliance. The podcast recording is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Planners Alliance may maintain positions in securities discussed on the program.
You are listening to the Money Huddle. My name is Michael Baker, and I'm here with my buddy, my business partner, Ross Marinell. What's up, Ross?
Today? So what's on your mind this morning?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about this article. I had saved it for a special occasion. As I was thinking, you know what? Hey, this would be something we really need to talk about. So this article came out. It was floated out there. I'm not really sure how I came across it, but it was written by a local news outlet in Denver, Colorado, out of the area. And so here's the headline. Man with Alzheimer's sent on a one-way flight to Denver among scores of patients stranded in hospitals.
Ooh, oh no.
So I read that, and immediately I'm like, okay, I need to know what happened. And essentially what happened, this gentleman, and it says his name here, it says his name was Jerry Ellingson, right? So Jerry suffers from Alzheimer's, and I believe his daughter put him on a one-way flight from Fort Myers, Florida.
Oh wow.
To Denver, and with no return ticket, like one-way ticket to Denver, and just basically abandoned him. They found him wandering in the airport. He was obviously didn't really know where he was, what he was doing there. And from what the article says, it says the police tried to contact his daughter and his wife, neither of whom would pick him up. So the officers were forced to call an ambulance that took him to a hospital. And so, obviously this is a horrific story, but what it ended up doing was it prompted like an Action 9 type of investigation.
Yeah.
And what it turns out is that this is starting to happen like fairly common. It's starting to become a common practice for folks that, are caring for somebody who has Alzheimer's or dementia, which, as we know, it's devastating in and of itself, not just financially, but it can be really difficult because you're dealing with a grown-up that doesn't necessarily know how to take care of themselves. So it's 24-hour care in a lot of times, and folks are just abandoning them. It said, that this guy in general is very confused about the details of his life. The daughter told the police, that she was quote unquote done with her father, have no use for him. This is the ex-wife. She says, has no use for him. I don't want to live with him. Were some of the things that she said. It's just, and of course, but what's interesting, it said that Jerry Ellingson was among 113 at-risk adults that were stranded in September.
Wow. 1 month.
Yeah.
And the big picture is, God forbid if that happens to a parent and you as, one of the children is responsible for that care or become responsible because something has to happen, right? That individual needs, more intensive care, whether it's a memory care facility or it's just a long-term care facility or someone who can visit the home. If it can't be paid for, if there's no financial way to help that gentleman, that person get care, a lot of times it falls on the family, and the families take the responsibility of figuring out how to make sure that individual can be cared for. And it sounds like, and we know a host of people that sacrifice time from work, sacrifice additional spending that they may be able to do for themselves, or retirement savings that they sacrifice to take care of parents that are aging. And it sounds like there's a growing group of people that either are unwilling or unable to take on that responsibility, and unfortunately it's putting people like Jerry in a very very sad situation where he can't remember enough to piece it together and figure out what the story is.
Sure.
And the states and these facilities are really in a tough spot too, because who's going to care for them?
Well, yeah, I think that was part of the. I mean, I think the hospitals have to take them, and I mean they're at a point where these people can go there and they're because they need obviously medical care. It's not somebody that's just is healthy. I mean, if you're suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that, and you're not able to take care of yourself, and so you're completely relying on other people, and in this case, I mean, we know from our we know that from our work and our research that the vast majority of long-term care by any stretch is done in the home. It's done by friends, mostly done by relatives, the spouse, if the spouse is still living, family members, and that's why they coined the phrase the sandwich generation, because you've got this generation of folks who have parents that are aging and are needing help and needing care, but they also have kids of their own. They have kids that are going to college, and they're trying to get their kids raised and get them up and becoming independent adults, and they're kind of stuck. And
right.
And what suffers a lot of times is their own finances, their own health. They're stressed out. They're spending money out of their own pocket, trying to supplement if mom and dad have any money that they can use to pay for care, or they may be sacrificing in the sense of they're having to work part-time, or they had to leave a full-time job or work less hours to be available to take care of mom and dad.
Right. And the financial and the emotional support gets stretched thin.
It is hit hard.
It sounds like some folks hit the breaking point, and it's tough, very, very tough to hear that these kind of stories are happening, but I think it's becoming more common. It's happening more frequently than we probably care to admit.
Right.
And it's going to have consequences.
Well, I do. I think one of the first things that when I read the article, one of the first things I thought of was this is how they're going to bring back these filial laws that are on the books.
Just explain that a little bit.
So filial laws are not, first of all, not every state has filial laws on the books. We are here in the Carolinas. South Carolina does not have filial laws on the books. North Carolina does.
Right.
And essentially what a filial law is, it's a law that basically requires relatives who have the means for, I think the term, legal term would be reasonable means to be able to take care of or provide for someone in their family. They are expected to do that. Versus just turning that family member over to become like a ward of the state or fully onto like Medicare or receive services. So it's essentially, if I were to paraphrase it in my words, it's like basically laws that are going to prevent people that have assets from just abandoning their family members and sending them on to the state.
Right. So I just, while we were talking, looked up this source: filial responsibility, can the legal duty to support our parents be effectively enforced? So this is by Shannon Frank Ellingson.
Okay.
And the first couple sentences right here in the introduction: parents must provide the basic necessities for their children, including food, shelter, clothing, and medical care. Right? We all believe that and understand that.
We hope, right?
In states that have filial responsibility statutes, adult children owe their parents the same affirmative duty.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Those keywords, owe.
Right.
Like they owe them the affirmative duty. And I think, so those two words, the two words that stuck out to me was that they owe it to them and there's a duty, so where I think is, is that as, as our culture ages, I mean, we've got this baby boomer generation that's going to continue to, 10,000 people turning 65. And, we're going to have, an aging population where, the demand for healthcare services is going to continue to increase as more and more people need those services. But with things like Alzheimer's and dementia, where or just people getting older and they can't fully take care of themselves. Long-term care, usually begins in the home. This is a big deal because essentially what I think is we're going to potentially see happening, as we talk about, the fiscal state of states themselves, and then our own federal government spending and whose responsibility is for what. I fully believe that this is low-hanging fruit for, lawmakers to come in and say, no, we have these laws on the books. This person that's done well, you're not just going to turn over your family member to become, to go on the Medicaid when you have assets to take care of them. You're not just going to abandon them at a hospital and have the state take care of them.
Right. So at some point, that family member puts Jerry on the one-way ticket plane to Denver.
That's the extreme case of it, but I also think that will be the case that gets mentioned when they're trying to push this through. They're going like, this is what people will actually go to. They will put their own family on a one-way flight to, literally like you put dad on a one-way flight. That's a level I can't even fathom.
And it may be down the road where it becomes enough of an occurrence, and where the states that have these laws on the books are going to have to start enforcing them. And what that means is you may end up being responsible for paying for some care.
Right. No, I think so. And I mean, because we know we joke a lot about some states in the union that are in definitely in worse fiscal shape than other states. We talk about it, but it's obviously, I wouldn't say that, that the country as a whole is just in wonderful shape financially. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's very complex. But one of the main arguments right now that's being put into the public sector or the public, square for debate is, how do we deal with healthcare? How are we going to handle healthcare for people moving forward? And, this is the kind of stuff that we are seeing on an extreme end, of course.
Right.
But you have to start thinking like, wow, I mean, this problem is not going away. And if we're already seeing cracks in the dam, what could potentially result from it? And, the government's solution for a lot of things tends to be rulemaking, or we create laws to punish behavior that we don't want to see. Well, that's why I think, a lot of states that have these laws, they're going to start dusting them off and saying, you know what? No, this isn't going to fly. And I think that we could see cases in the future where the states are going to start suing people, because and obviously the fun part of it for the attorneys is going to be all the legal language. Well, we're going to start talking about what's reasonable care and what duty. Well, what extent is the duty, too. But that's where I think this might be headed.
Right, and to boot, we know the seriousness of memory care issues, and how much more prevalent it's become for someone to live long enough to experience some form of memory loss, whether it's Alzheimer's, dementia. It's just becoming more common as we tend to live longer, and so it's something we're not going to be able to sidestep. We're going to have to deal with the problem because it is an incredible financial commitment to care for somebody properly, whether you're paying for it through a facility or whether you're paying for it by lack of work and taking yourself out of the workforce to care for an aging parent or family member. So one way or another, we're going to have to deal with the cost, and it is real because the cost of qualified long-term care facilities is it could be devastating to financial security.
Right. And so the way that the reason I thought this would be a great topic to bring up is not just to bring awareness to like what's going on and just kind of the utter shock factor that I had when I read that, because I couldn't believe that somebody would do that. But was the fact that, one of the things that I'm encouraging more and more of my younger clients to do is because we have this thing culturally where we don't like to talk about money. It's kind of a taboo topic. We don't tend, generally speaking, like talking about our own private, personal financial business with anybody else. Right.
Right.
And so what I'm encouraging a lot of our younger clients to is engage their parents, not in a combative way, but just say, hey, mom, dad, I love you and I care about you guys. Here's what I'm doing in my own life. I'm trying to put things together. I just want to know, like, hey, do you feel confident in what you guys got going on? Have you thought about long-term care? Do you have long-term care? Do you feel like, you're squared away? And I know that may feel uncomfortable, but the fact is like, I'd rather have a 5 to 10 year head start in knowing that, hey, if something happens to mom, like I'm going to have to take care of mom because mom doesn't have long-term care insurance, or mom doesn't have, a really sizable amount of assets that mom's going to need help. I would rather know that in advance than, to get a phone call one day, mom had a bad doctor report. We've got early onset dementia, and now mom has no capacity to sign documents. She can't take care of herself, right. All these other things. So that's kind of the angle I'm taking is start trying to have those family conferences, especially if you have siblings, right? Where, maybe mom and dad live close to you, but you've got siblings in other states or live farther away, is having those family conferences so you can kind of put together like a plan or a strategy. Say, hey, here's what can happen, because what you'll find is, and this is something we talk about all the time, it is so hard to make financial decisions when you're stressed to the max, right? And I can't think of a more stressful type of environment than find out like, hey, mom, dad can't take care of themselves anymore, or, mom's going to need, full on healthcare, and nobody saw it coming, and nobody knows how they're going to navigate it. Right. So to me, I'm thinking, let's get in front of it. And, and I'll tell you a story from my own life, right?
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, I'm dealing with my parents, and we're sitting down, and they're like, and these are my parents. So, despite all my credentials, years in the business, my parents, they changed my diapers. So, while I know a few things and they'll ask me a question, they don't really get advice from me, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm still the baby boy,
sure.
In the family. So at any rate, what we're talking and we're going through, and they start bringing out, like pulling out insurance policies, and what do you think about this? And what do you think about this? And I'm seeing these things that they purchased. Well, anyway, believe it or not, my parents have purchased long-term care insurance.
Oh, great.
And not just long-term care. They got a solid policy. Both of them did. And my mom, right? So my mom is looking at me like, do I really need to keep this? Should I keep paying this premium? And I looked her dead in the face, like stone cold. I said, Mom, if there is one check you write for the rest of your life, I was like, this is the check you write for the rest of your life. Because it's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of benefit with inflation protection, right? Non-cancelable policy. And I'm sitting here and I'm thinking like, do not, no matter what you do, cancel that. And I believe I even said to her, that if you think where you get to the point where you don't want to pay for this anymore, let me know, because I will pay for it.
That's a good point, because if it's the children that may have to step in, if the parents get to the point where the long-term care policy gets too costly,
right?
Hey, let's get a financial professional involved. Let's look at that policy, make sure it may be something where it's wise for the children to help chip in and pay for it. Because if that can help assure a quality care facility for your parents, then that is a major stress reliever if it ever gets to the point where that's needed.
Oh, no, man. So I was just telling you, actually, now I'm thinking about this. We were just having a conversation this morning where, I was doing the math. We, got someone was asking me about, how am I going to pay for this? And they started explaining to me the situation, and the home they're going into an assisted living facility, brand new facility, where you start out just paying to live there, and then as you need more care, like you start going through these tiers where they increase the cost. Well, just to go be in the facility in a studio apartment, right? In a studio apartment is $5,000 a month. Not a one bedroom, not a two bedroom. That's a studio, right? So then you go through tiers. Well, the other part of it is there's a spouse involved, right? The spouse has got to go to a nursing home. The nursing home is going to be $7,000 a month. Right. So when you start talking about things that hit a dent in whatever savings are available, assisted living care, home health care, any long-term care type of, where you got round the clock supervision or skilled nurses involved. It is very expensive. It's almost to the point where I don't even know how you save for it. It's one of those things that you need to insure against.
Right. Well, a one-way ticket is a lot less expensive. And
God, bad.
I would say, again, just goes to show the extreme that most people are willing to take to properly care for a family member is they spend the money, they pay for in-home care, they do it
stop
themselves. It's incredible the lengths that most people go to, but you can see the extreme as to how someone with less financial means or ability to stop their life don't have a lot of other a lot of choices, great choices.
No, I'm with you, and so to me, like what I would say, like in my view, the main takeaway I would say is like a couple of things. One is one of the things we talk about just in investing is legislative risk, right? The Congress can pass a law, they can't seem to get anything done right now. But when they are actually functioning, I mean, they could pass a law that impacts everybody. You go back and you look at, the ACA, right? We know it as Obamacare, where the complete overhaul of the health insurance industry. That law impacted pretty much anyone that uses healthcare services in our country, right? Some more than others, but that's what we call legislative risk. Well, I think about this, like for families that have parents that are older, Congress could come out and they could say, hey, we're going to address this head on. Every state that has a filial law, you have your own autonomy to create your filial laws, but if not, there's just going to be a federal statute that comes out and lays down A, B, and C. Because if you think about it, the fallback program for a lot of the stuff is Medicaid, which is a joint venture between the federal government and the states. So it could be the state you live in, or it could potentially be the federal government that creates some type of law that says, hey, there is going to be a level of responsibility that must be borne by the family member. So to me, know that in the back of your mind, which is why I think number 2 for me is this is a wonderful opportunity right now while everyone's healthy, there's no crisis going on, is just to start engaging, with your parents and saying, hey, mom and dad, love you, not trying to get in your business. We're trying to do financial planning and planning ahead. And I just want to know, like, hey, if something were to happen to mom or if something were to happen to dad, what's your plan for that? Am I going to need to step in or me and, my brother and sister, are we going to have to step in and kind of help, provide care? What's your thoughts on that? And, it might be uncomfortable, but I would much rather it be uncomfortable and you sort through that because it's awkward than trying to figure it out when like, oh gosh, mom's sick or dad's sick. What are we going to do? And you don't have a plan. You've never even talked about it.
That's right. Well, hey, listen, it's just like with a living will. You may discuss your end of life plans. Hey, here's what my wishes are if it comes to this point. We just need to open that conversation for a few years in advance and say, all right, if you need care, where's it going to come from? What should we do? What do you want from us?
I know just for my sake is like for me as a planner, like if I'm trying to help someone plan for their financial future, like I think that's something we should know. Like, hey, we're trying to save and we're trying to accumulate money so we can do X, Y, and Z. But I mean, is this something that are we going to be thinking like, hey, if something happens to mom, is she coming to live with us and we're going to take care of her? Because that will impact our plan, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So, to me, it makes all the sense in the world. Obviously, sometimes it can feel awkward, if you're a child going to your parents and want to engage them about their finances. But we just think that, planning ahead is better, get started early. Then wait till life happens and then you're trying to sort it out while you're dealing with all the emotions and all the stress. And so, don't be like this lady who
definitely
put her father on the one-way flight to Denver. Don't be that. Don't be like that. Don't put yourself in a situation where that ends up being even a thought in your mind. So we hopefully this made sense. I think it's relevant, especially for younger couples, younger families that are trying to plan for the future while mom and dad are still here. Planning is the key. So thank you for listening. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll talk to you next time.